Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Woods, thank you for joining us. Your testimony highlights how states can be unfairly penalized for air pollution that they can't control, whether it drifts across borders, international state borders, a number of things, whether it stems from wildfires, natural sources, the Foreign Emissions and Non-Attainment Clarification for Economic Stability, or the Fences Act, aims to correct that problem by making sure that states aren't labeled as non-attainment when the pollution is literally out of their hands. And your testimony points out that non-attainment designations can delay permits, hurt economic growth, and don't actually get after the problem that they're trying to solve. So I want to ask a couple of questions. How would clarifying Section 179B, as the Fences Act proposes, reduce permitting delays or protect the environment better than what we're actually doing right now?
It's a great question, and I apologize in advance for perhaps being a little bit long-winded. This is something I'm very passionate about, and I think the bill goes a long way to clarify this provision that allows for state agencies like ours to capture the right moment. So as EPA thinks about international background, other sources that are outside the control of a local agency as the primary regulator of air quality, there are several points in which the agency could consider it. When it sets the standards, when it does designations of an area initially, when it looks at redesignating those areas into attainment or non-attainment, when it reclassifies, as my testimony lays out in great detail, as you get in non-attainment and then higher classifications from marginal to moderate to serious to severe to extreme, the penalties on permitting, on transportation funds and transportation conformity, on fuel requirements become much more heavy-handed and can just devastate and strangle economic growth and are really at the core of the permitting issue. So we want the whole country to be in attainment, but the 179B provision is actually to avoid getting bumped up beyond marginal to those more significant penalties. So in this case, I think the provision clarifies, and this bill would clarify for EPA what I think they could do already, which is to grant demonstrations by states that show that they would have attained but for those international contributions. And when we're talking about 5, 10, 20 parts per billion of a 70 part per billion standard coming from Canada, Mexico, Asia, and elsewhere, that's what puts you over the top to a 72 or 75 part per billion design value and would have an incredible impact on the opportunities for eliminating those delays in permitting, economic activity, and innovation that would also bring down emissions overall.
The fear-mongering that we just heard, and the lack of actual work with industries that do want to comply with this type of thing. And I can point back to a variety of visits, including the Region 6 director under President Biden, who came to my area and was amazed at the monitoring that we actually had out there. But they never once thought, and especially when they lowered the parts per million requirement, they never, through a rule, just a unilateral rule, they never once thought about talking to industry. So they're actually not solving the problems, and we want to be realistic about it. I'll turn to Ms. Coons and talk about infrastructure and the AI game that we know is here. And just looking at the data centers, the semiconductor facilities, and other advanced manufacturing, we've heard from several witnesses that the current Clean Air Act permitting, especially the prevention of significant deterioration in the Title V requirements, can add years to project timelines. And I'd like to hear your thoughts about Micron is building multiple large semiconductor fabrication facilities across the country. How can the Clean Air Act permitting timelines influence the schedule and the cost of these projects while not necessarily achieving the desired goals?
Yeah, thank you, Congressman. From this perspective, what we have seen is a lengthy environmental permitting and review process that where we have duplicative reviews in some cases, we have interagency coordination of up to tens of agencies where oftentimes we may receive conflicting guidance. So within this, to streamline that process and remove those particular barriers within the application process itself would be critically important to ensuring that we can start construction on time and deliver for our operational needs that will ultimately bring products, our product to market for everything from automobiles to electronics to AI.
You mentioned, you described wildfire smoke as an uncontrollable factor in meeting the new PM 2.5 standards, and I know this has been discussed already, but what kind of regulatory clarity or legislative action would help alleviate that?
Thank you, Congressman. I think in this particular space, we really need to look at codifying the definitions further of natural versus human-caused wildfire. These definitions will provide meaningful clarity to applicants and permittees.
Thank you. And Chairman, I think the work that the Chevron deference case had with clarity to this body, to be specific, is really important, and I yield back.